back. You're watching Sokoni here on Morning Prime. We continue pace with the conversation regarding KRA, and what is happening right now is they will be mounting cameras in your factories to try and curb tax evasion. The National Treasury has revealed plans that are afoot to station KRA staff inside major factories across the country to enhance monitoring and tightening the news. Actually, these are spies on tax cheats. This is despite planned heavy investment in technology, indicated KRA, which is under pressure by the Ruto government to collect more taxes, is expected to pull all stops to nab tax cheats and boost collection. And we know Kenya Revenue Authority also collected 174 million shillings from digital services tax during the 6 months leading up to December 2022. The revenue comes from digital service providers like Google, Netflix, Meta, Twitter, and Microsoft, which is expected to increase 300 million shillings by June. The tax has much growth potential given the increasing popularity of e-commerce in the country, and the KRA plans to register more businesses for the tax in the coming year. The income tax, that is the digital service tax law of 2022, requires businesses that sell services online to pay 1.5% flat tax on the value of the services provided through digital platform and 16% value-added tax. That is just to give you an inkling of where they're headed. So they are stopping at nothing right now, and soon we'll have spies in your factories to try and see if, of course, you are evading taxes. There will be drones hovering over your premises. And if you are, of course, conversing with any KRA officials where matters regarding taxes are concerned, they will be having body cams as well to capture, those conversations. And this is a discussion that we've been talking about. Where is privacy? Are you violating our privacy, encroaching, and becoming too close for comfort?
We've heard of this, and then we've heard of KRA wants to integrate its systems to the M-Pesa, to the bank account. So we are headed in a very dangerous area. We want to weaponize KRA. And we have seen that if you go that route, it's going to be abused. This government has gone through hell. They know during the campaigns how KRA weaponized institutions have been used to undermine them. And I think the second thing is that for businesses to, you'll be discouraging them. There are ethical ways of doing businesses. Businesses are in competition. My operations, my factory, my things are private. They're confidential. I'm in competition with other businesses in the country and outside. You cannot, put cameras there and try to record my activities, my operations, and my,
Actually sending a staff there. They'll be sending their staff
or putting a staff there. I think what this government needs to focus on is let them start from the expenditure side of things. Let us try and manage expenditure. This country, we should be grateful to the people of Kenya. We are collecting 2 trillion this year. That is $20 billion. It's more than all the revenues for all of the other East African countries combined, all the other 5 combined. I think the focus of the government should be on how to utilize money. They should put cameras. They should put cameras in every government office, from the CS to the PS to State House. Those are the places where we need cameras. That's where the corruption is. The corruption is not happening in factories.
In the procurement offices.
In the procurement offices. In all those institutions where people manage public resources, that is where you need to put cameras. That's where you need to see what's happening to money. But I think you'll be discouraging investors. You'll be discouraging businesses. I mean, all the things, the cost of production is already too high. We've talked of power. We've talked of other energy. You've talked of infrastructure. Then now you're adding KRA again. I mean, what are you going to tell people and you're trying to tell investors, come? I don't see how this thing would work. I mean, it's really going to be a disincentive to businesses, and you're criminalizing business. I think it is wrong. I think it's misplaced, and it should not be done.
Yes, as I listened to Bill Kero, I worry a bit. It's an argument which, if you push it, the counterfactual might be that business would be concerned because they haven't been doing the right thing, and now this will be discovered. But what I see as the big downside risk is what we said during the break, that these people will get easily onto the payroll of the one they're supposed to be watching over. It doesn't. I think distance is a useful thing. That there must be ways with technology in which you get some information to counter check or to provide an alternative estimation of throughput that you are seeking to tax, short of positioning somebody physically on the factory floor in a green overall, physically literally just looking over. I think that those will not work very well. But for a long time, government has embedded, for example, NIS type people inside institutions. They're in these ministries working and so on, even KRA and in other places. They may appear like employees, but they may not. So I think these tactics have been tried, but I think probably they're being crude in what they're planning to do with KRA, embedding KRA inside producing units. And I think that kind of arrogance of power will be counterproductive. I think it must be more subtle. I think it should have been well checked out. I know the IRS in the US has some presence in some of the major production units, but perhaps not to the factory floor. But usually can be physically, they can be brought, in the old days they'd be physical, but now you can do that long distance. For example, the systems we use here for receipting, the tax machines, the revenue ETR machines, those are gadgets can communicate. They have the potential to provide for not just a receipt, but communicate what the transaction was real time.
And they use Q code on the invoices. They have the Q code. Any invoice you make.
So already are getting quite a lot of information there. Even in the old weights and measures, somebody would come around every so often and check if it's giving the correct weights and measures and that you're not cheating the customers. I think similarly these ETRs or similar things can be able to provide a sense of what the level of transactions are. I take my car for service in some garage. It started out to be a very effective one, garage. But interestingly, they have a pay bill number. And I used that for a while, and that's very convenient. And suddenly they said, no, the pay bill is broken down. I don't know what that really means. Now send it to this number. Now, so each time I send my car for service, I now send the money to somebody's
mobile number.
That is it. So initially I thought he was stealing from his boss, but he's one of the owners, or probably he's the owner. Clearly he's evading
taxes.
Transaction where taxes will be not detected. Tax liability will not be detected.
But there are lots of that also in town.
I'm sure they're all over the place.
By some of the Asians, farms here in the town, they don't have pay bill or buy goods.
It is true. It is true. There is potential to increase revenue collection, but there is also a way in which you can make it obnoxious. Now, for example, if I remember the fight between the KRA and the what do you call the lady, that factory near Naivasha, Keroche, to a point where now they had become so intrusive and disruptive, they punctured, some of her equipment and so on and so forth. That was really now, I know that was political persecution also on it. I don't think we should push it to a point where it's obnoxious, it's counterproductive, and so on. And I think we should do surveillance using technology in ways that are positive and that can build businesses. They do not discourage businesses, incentives to invest and so on. I think there's a limit to which KRA should expand its tax sources and so on. But I think they should do it with some, I can't call it decorum, but I think they should do it in ways that are legal, that are consistent with good business practice. I don't think that we should just go in there and impose. I think that would be very counterproductive.
Iraqi.
I'm liking this discussion because as we went to the polls last year, one of the biggest discussion was the government is very indebted. The government is taking too much debt. That was the big issue. Now we are being told, since you don't take debt, you can pay taxes. Because if you don't get money from debt, you get money from taxes. And that's why the government is very aggressive on how to get money from taxes.
But that is not entirely true, because the government is still getting the debt. In fact, compared to all this administration, it is going up by 7%.
That's very true. I'm not disputing that. But they're trying to reduce the amount of money that is going to debt or getting from debt. But the approach they are using to get tax is a bit Orwellian. I don't know how many of you have read the book 1984 by George Orwell. You need to read it. So the problem is when you station people in my workshop, first of all, you interfere with my workers. Because they don't know whether you are watching them or whether you're watching on behalf of KRA. And to me, that's institution of public or freedom.
And you have gadgets of surveillance.
Yes, I think the best way to do that is not to put people in factories and so on. The best approach to make Kenyans pay tax is simply show them what you do with the tax.
Correct.
But if I see my tax is going well, I will do it even who is a bro to show people or to report people not paying taxes. But now other people are skeptical of what happens with their tax. And number three, and very important, is we are talking about the ease of doing business. And you cannot make the ease of doing business, you cannot improve the ease of doing business when you're always hovering on my back. People want their freedom. And people don't see it just as watching all my factor, they see it as an intrusion to the freedom. So we are going to start asking, where else are we going to have government agencies watching over us? Is it in my classroom? Is it in my hotel? Okay, of course, the government does surveillance everywhere, but not when we are making money for the government. Remember, business people are not criminals. They are people doing genuine business. In fact, the government should be very grateful. The government should even be throwing a party for business people because they are the people who fund the government. Now you are being seen as a criminal. You have to be watched. It's not fair.
It's not fair.
Yeah.
Right. Gituro, as we wind up on the tax.
I think not to talk much in it because I think it has said, but I just give an example where I'm in this members club, and I think about 5 or so years we were manual, and you looked in terms of the revenue per month.
Yes.
And we went cashless, and you saw the difference. We closed all those loopholes. The fundamental question is why people, it's actually very positive, people like paying taxes on condition they'll see what that tax is doing. That's all. Putting people there, you're right, the George Owen, isn't it? Yes, 19, it was supposed to be 1948 or whatever, and talks about it. Yeah, he just said to 90 to 48. And that's it. There are countries in this world, they are paying taxes so high.
Right.
And the question where I think Bill was bringing, just make this in a way that I'll get what's happening in that particular factory at the end of it all. That's all.
So even as they're collecting taxes, if you head over also to the Standard on page 10, we were debating about why the legislators are actually in Mombasa for an induction for 2 weeks in a high-end hotel. And you are supposed to be paying up 75 million shillings, you, the taxpayer, for lawmakers meeting in Mombasa. MPs will get 10,000 shillings in allowances each day or per day, despite boycotting retreat for 2 days. Also, the workshop will be facilitated by trainers from Ghana and Uganda. I want just to give you a breakdown of how this is bound to affect you. MPs, it says in Mombasa seminar, what it costs to have MPs in Mombasa just to be having these seminars. And of course, Waziri, Mweshimiwa will tell us more about this. Nairobi to Mombasa, round trip, economy class per policy on domestic travel. Average flight cost is 15,215. We have number of MPs now who are there, 349. You can do the math. MPs spent 5.3 million shillings on flight fare alone. The figure does not include the MP's aid travel costs as well, because they go there with, of course, the handlers as well. Pride Inn Paradise Hotel cost Superior King and Deluxe rooms overnight stay averages between 40,000 per MP. We have 349 for them for 5 days. This will rake in 6.9 million shillings. MP's per diem. MP's per diem to Mombasa is 18,200 shillings per day. All right, for 5 days, that is what they're going to be working in, 91,000 shillings. Each cost of per diem for 5 days for all, it will be 31.8 million shillings. And of course, this is a TripAdvisor, Kenya Airways, Booking.com, where we've gathered all this information. Speaking big on austerity, and of course, on the other side, acting differently from that particular. Does it really add up? This is for 2 good weeks in Mombasa, and here we have body cams collecting these taxes. You're talking about how you're utilizing these taxes. This is why people also will evade taxes, because if we're talking in a country where bursaries, and we see it, we're crying for the CDF to be released. Now we have Treasury now who has curtailed and buckled down to actually release these particular funds.
What is this meeting for?
Let's ask Minister Sakwa. You can tell us what this meeting is for.
Meetings
first of all, because we've had, this is not the first induction. We've had induction in Naivasha for the MPs. There was induction for the senators at Safari Park. Why do you need these inductions? You have, in fact, you have the Center for Parliamentary Training in Karen. And I was asking legislators, why can't we utilize these resources instead of going to Mombasa? Or even just Naivasha here, which is near, you don't need to take, or Kenya School of Government, where we had the chair there. Or that is a preserve for the state corporations.
For Kenyans.
It's for Kenyans.
These kinds of get-togethers are useful for institutions, a sense of capacity building. They get people on the same wavelength on where the corporate goals are, where the priorities lie, and so on. But just, I want to make 2 points. One will be a matter of principle, a strategic thing, but the other is that I think there may be errors in the way the numbers have been tabulated there. They do not accommodate security people. Generally, there may be the odd person or two. Members of Parliament domestically fly economy, except a few of the House leadership people, and just a few who would be entitled to a business class ticket. The rest of them will just fly economy.
They'll fly economy, but also their cars will be driven to Mombasa to pick them from the airport.
No, usually the airport pickup is organized entirely by Parliament. You walk out and you've got a vehicle waiting for you to take you to the hotel. There would be people, like, let's say, just as an example, those who come from the coast and they want to sort of dash home, dash somewhere in the off hours of the conference. They may have their vehicle, but it's not as if that's the way that people do it. No, it isn't. But the principle is there still that they have gone to Mombasa for this training. It will cost money. However, what the money is, however much it is or little it is, it has an opportunity cost. At a time of austerity, we should be doing different things. But the SRC has been working with Parliament and other institutions, and I must say they've already shaved off a lot of the costs. So there are some savings that are being imposed and made. And the good thing with them is that, Parliament, of course, as in theory, has the power to overrun SRC by changing the law. But SRC pretty clever. Under the existing rule, they could say, if you do this, you'll finally be personally responsible. And then you find line managers, backing away from doing things not approved by SRC. Overall, I think one can make the argument that Parliament as an institution should seek, in the medium and longer term, should seek to be a cost-minimizing institution. They should find ways and means in which they minimize costs, where they can take advantage of existing installed capacity, let's say, Center for Parliamentary Studies, perhaps even use KSG facility or something similar. The Center for Parliamentary Studies is supposed to help take care of these kinds of capacity building things and so on. I'm glad now, and I was very pleased to see that some of the resource persons they're using are Ghana and Uganda, and not necessarily Westminster or something like that, coming in sometimes. You listen to them and you say, hey, we could have done this differently and so on, and the conditions are different. But I think that they must also begin to feel the cold wind of austerity. That, I think, should be the message to them. And that internally they have to find ways how they are going to lower costs And you do that, sometimes you can just do that by squeezing the envelope that goes to them, and internally there will be the envelope of allocation from the Treasury that goes to Parliament. And internally we'll have to find efficiencies that will lower unit costs and make it a bit cheaper for them. Particularly at the period where the economy is just beginning to recover from the COVID days and so on and so forth, where things didn't go too well. But on that, by the way, the revenue collection was very high during those 2 years of COVID, and goodness me, I've never understood how that happened.
And there was no business.
No, except they must have had a side kitty, which they said we can't now keep this kitty since we're not collecting enough. Bring it back into the main. So I don't know what it is. But whatever the case is, I think Parliament as an institution can be subjected, must be subjected to the sort of austerity measures that others are doing. And not just Parliament. We looked at one time as a result of, I don't know what had inspired us. What does it cost to maintain a parliamentarian? What does it cost to maintain a big bureaucrat in government? And there's a lot of waste there. You remember when the gas guzzlers were supposed to be taken back and off the street? And they've come back, they bounced back in a big way. And nobody's looking at that. And the SRC has not put its spotlight officially there. Overall, the public sector must not enjoy unnecessary luxury because that's on the back of the taxpayer. The private sector could do that if they so wish, because the consumers of their service that pay have a choice not to. But in the case of tax, I think that austerity needs to take place. On the one hand, austerity, and on the other, effective use of resources, so as my colleagues have said over and over, that you can see what the money is doing and so on. But I think perhaps these headlines for Parliament are not flattering.
They're not flattering. So is it the piece of the Parliamentary Service Commission, Bill Okero, to try and look into this? Or how does the Parliamentary Service Commission come into play with the welfare of the legislators?
Parliamentary Service Commission is the employer.
Is the employer.
Of members of Parliament. And so they determine many of the things, particularly all the terms of remuneration, the benefits, everything is set and determined by the Parliamentary Service Commission. So they have a significant role in what happens. It approves all the projects, all the activities, where money is spent. So they're responsible, in all these matters of finances and all this. So yeah, Parliamentary Service has a clear role. But I think what Mashimo said is I agree with him 100%. Look, we have no qualms about members of Parliament going out for training, for capacity building. But I think they need to display some sensitivity in times when millions of Kenyans are facing starvation, and many more are unable to put bread on the table. I think that's the only thing they need to do. They need to display.
That's an animal we always hide, capacity building. Well, how long will you build this capacity?
For as long as there are new members coming in every year.
Let me tell you, there's a real need for capacity building among some of these members. I can tell you that for a fact.
Yeah.
It's the most arrogant group, and I don't like talking about. When I was in the vision, you go to Mombasa, they get their per diem, they disappear. If they stay there, they are inside their phone. The only person I really gave him kudos was Governor Kiraitu. He stayed and listened. But these are the guys. They just they disappear. Their vehicles, as you say, they have come from Mombasa. And it's interesting, the MP for Karoreni, Paul Katana, is saying, we cannot term this as a waste of time or money. It is part of our job to fight the Kenyans' rights. Said Katana, when asked about the cost of the boycott of the taxpayer. Let's not tell ourselves. Do you think they just want that membership? They don't care about it. If you see them actually, I find them at the times obnoxious, uncouth.
Those are very...
Yes, I mean it. And I will not waste the time discussing with them about Parliament. Let's enjoy our drinks or whatever we're doing. But you say you're fighting for the Kenyan, give me a break. Give me a break. You get there, there's this MP, he gets there, and the first thing he buys is a vehicle worth 12 million.
Well, he's got to go to the nook and the crannies
Professor Karega,
of his constituency. He needs
Professor Karega and hope he gets well, is not well. When he was a PS for education, he said, no, I want a Toyota Corolla. Because the moment I live here, I can manage one. So, to me, it's the same as we had a whole week, 3 days in Nanyuki. The same question we could be asking ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with those places, team. But the situation we are in, with the bottom of the hole, these are the things to do.
Indeed.
And Lee Kuan Yew, as I finished, Lee Kuan Yew, he took a flight. They were going, I think they were from Singapore, either Cambodia or one of those countries. He took a business class. He said, no. Let me go to a class I can afford. They went to his son, the son had to pay. He went to the hotel. He had days, presidential parties, whatever you call them, presidential rooms.
Suite.
Yeah. He said, no. I'll stay like anybody else. So Singapore, the point I'm making here, Singapore realized we want to be a third world in 35 years. There are things we need to really cut. At times you look, and it's not even the current president, you look at the motorcade of the president, all the way from Moi, it's like, my God.
Let's hear from Iraqi.
I'm enjoying this debate because I see it in a number of perspectives. When you take MPs to Mombasa or to Eldoret or Naivasha, they're good specific places, by the way. It's more of entrepreneurship. But if I go out, I will get some per diem. So if they transact that business in parliament, they'll not be paying that per diem. So to me, that is misplaced entrepreneurship. There are better ways of making money and making more money. But maybe that's why they need induction.
That is easy money.
Easy money. That's why they need induction, so that we can teach them about the ethics and the tenets of capitalism, how you make money honestly. And very important, what it means to be a reader. I hope that's one of the contents of what they are being inducted on by Ugandans and Ghanaians. I don't know why we are not invited. You don't believe these two professors cannot teach MPs anything? I'm just curious. I think this induction can be done in the workplace. Why must you go to Mombasa, or why must you go to a hotel? I don't understand, maybe I'm not very enlightened, but I don't understand why we believe in this country that for something to be done, you must go to a hotel. I've always wondered, if I took my students to go and do an exam in Norfolk Hotel, would they pass better than University of Nairobi Horse?
It's the ambience.
So I don't know why you believe that.
The ambience. The ambience will bring out,
Even if you have not read.
And I think this is an issue of status.
Who knows?
It's an issue of status, and we need to forget about it. That
Right.
You must go to Mombasa, you must go to this. And this issue of status, I don't know why it hangs over Africans all the time. For example, I've been looking around to see a government GOK VITS or a county government VITS, because me, I drive a VITS, a very small car, which is very convenient.
But I've never seen a GOK VITS.
So why must you drive a big car?
That's the only one they don't have.
Yeah, does it make you less MP or less reader? I think we need to realize that being an MP is already a status enough. You don't need anything else to go to a hotel.
Right.
But these are being MPs, they can tell us.
Yeah, I wanted to come to Bilo and
Two of them, actually.
and we can ask you.
Especially went to Dubai for a visit something.
We have that towering building there next to Parliament that has been renovated, and I wonder, what is that building for?
New building.
Actually,
the new building.
The new building next to Parliament.
Yeah.
What is this supposed? Because I know you have your friends
former
there.
continental.
It's talk about the new.
Yeah.
It was former continental.
But Parliament House. Remember that? It used to be it is supposed to be the offices for members of Parliament.
Yeah. Offices for members of Parliament.
Yes, every member of Parliament should
have an
office.
Will have.
And the offices that were there before were not adequate. Members of Parliament were being housed, some in KICC, some in private, by the way, some have private offices in town. So there was a challenge, when Parliament was increased to over 350 members. Now you add the Senate, that's over almost. So I think that large number, so they needed offices. I think that's why they put it.
But why would you need the offices? You have to from something.
To do their work.
Yeah.
These are office holders, they're state officers. They have work to do, they have constituents to meet.
That's
Professor here,
I thought the office
the office wants to meet his member of parliament, that's where he goes.
The constituencies, well, we have these offices. It makes sense if Bunyasi Nambale, you have your office in Nambale.
Well, they do have.
Yes,
they do have.
And here?
And here also they have, yes.
For what?
No, you have to hear about
the activities. MPs do also work for the committee of the House. They have to prepare for the debates, the legislative responsibilities.
You're talking to an MP, so
order, Professor.
So in that building, there is no a training facility like a conference hall to actually.
No, if you go to the main Parliament building, that's where all the committee meetings are held. By the way, they don't go out for other committee meetings. Every day there are dozens of halls there that are used for meetings. Meetings including public hearings are held there. Meetings for the committees are held there. So they only go out mainly to those hotels for capacity building or those kind of things.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. I think we need to they've made it very clear. But even as we're talking taxes, one of the biggest headache that also we can see most of the companies who are falling in this country is the tax issue. Right now we have Delaru who are falling and Kenyans who are working there, 300 of them are bound to be losing their jobs right now because of the Delaru, and who are saying also the cost of doing business has become extremely difficult. And they said they do not expect banknote printing order from central bank for at least the next 12 months due to slow market demand. We can see the invention now of the mobile money wallets affecting, the hard currency. And Delaru, most Kenyans thought also is a Kenyan company for the longest time, it has been in this country, will be also a big blow for us to see such a giant leaving the economy, following, of course, some big firms like Schneider Electric, Colgate, Palmolive, and Reckitt Beckinsale. I don't know if also Nestle is also in the pipeline as well to leave the country. Cadbury,
so many.
And amazingly, they're just looking at what was on the front page of Business Daily this week. IMF is projecting Ethiopia and Angola economies will overtake Kenya. And we were reading also from the Citizen as well in Tanzania that 600 European firms, they're all setting sight in Tanzania. What is happening to a country? Let's just listen into this story that was done by my colleague, Noah Kipkemboi, just telling us about, not really Noah Kipkemboi, I can't remember that. Noah Kipkemboi was a private bill, but let's just listen into that story. We'll highlight where Delaru is at and why it's leaving Kenya.
UK-listed printing firm Delaru has suspended its printing operations in Kenya over reduced demand for physical currency. This even as the firm is now faced with a hefty tax demand from Kenya Revenue Authority.
Delaru as a company has been facing challenges. If you look at the year to date, their profit year to March has been about 436 million shillings. But if you look at the KRA tax claim on them, is about 1 billion shillings. So they will need to have almost 3 years of profitability to take care of that KRA tax claim, which is significant. Number two is the issue of money supply, which Delaru performs on behalf of government. Providing currency, money supply, is probably the fourth most important aspect of government. So that in itself will be affected and is a concern.
The firm, which operates under a 60-40 joint venture with the government of Kenya, secured a new lifeline when it won a 13 billion shilling currency design and printing tender in 2018 after Kenya set out to introduce new banknotes. The operation would have been sufficient to sustain the firm as the government pushed to replace its old currency to comply with the new constitution. The emergence of new technologies coupled with a move to mainstream mobile money transactions as the preferential mode of payment during the COVID-19 pandemic would have dealt the company a big blow.
For people already using digital money, I think their life will continue to be the same, if not more in terms of convenience. There is a rise in digital money, but there is also strong demand for currency. So I don't think it's true to say that there is no demand for cash, for physical cash.
The firm, whose profits dipped from 473 million shillings to 336 million in 2022, is set to release the last lot of workers by March 2023. Central Bank of Kenya disclosures show that the currency production costs, which include ordering, printing, minting, freight, insurance and handling expenses, hit 2.39 billion in the financial year ended June 2022, compared with the 2.09 billion in the previous year.
One year without printing currency, that will have a major impact on those cash constituencies. It will try and force more people into the digital infrastructures. But we also have to remember, as Kenyans, that digital money was meant to complement physical cash. It's not meant to substitute.
De La Rue's suspension of operations in Kenya means it will now be left with 3 banknote sites, UK, Malta and Sri Lanka, down from 5 in 2020. This highlights the declining demand for banknotes globally as digital transactions gain traction.
I think it also puts into question maybe our tax policies, and our tax policies inhibiting companies from operating, or are they helping? Because tax policies need to encourage investors, not encourage divestment. The big concern for government is, why is this big British multinational that's everywhere in the world, why is it exiting Kenya? And I think that they need to look at that more seriously, because you don't want other companies to follow that trend.
The firm, which has been working in Kenya for over 25 years, remains positive on exploring business opportunities with a view to restarting production if the economic climate permits. For KTN News, I'm Dombi Esther Diana.
Right, that's the story there. And of course, now De La Rue is picking up the ticket and following and joining the line of Cadbury, Nestle, Reckitt Benckiser, Colgate, Palmolive, also Schneider Electric. And this is because of the high cost of doing business here in the country. And of course, the changing terrain on how transaction is being carried out right now. Everything is going digital, and that is affecting also their business, which is their core business, currency production. But Bilal, let's just begin with you on that particular note. First of all, that particular 1.2 billion shillings tax that KRA is hovering over them to meet. It has been around. Could that also be an exacerbating issue, factor for them leaving?
Yeah, I think the KRA issue, the courts have ruled, but they have an opportunity to go to appeal, because the issue of that 1.2 billion, I think, was on the royalties that the company was paying to its parent company in UK. You know, and KRA, you know, insisting that there is tax due on that. You know, when you pay royalties, there's tax due 15%, I think, withholding tax or something. There's tax due on that. But I think the company insisted that they don't have any, you know, the parent company didn't have intellectual rights, and they didn't make any payment of royalties. No royalties are due to UK, and so there will be no tax due. Those are the disputes. But I think they should have appealed. But in its heydays...
But even if, yeah, that's what I'm asking you. In the heydays, I think...
They were printing money for up to 18 countries. You know, it's one of the few places in this world where currency is being printed. You know, and this is an opportunity. It's business for Kenya, really. And it's a pity that today, because there is no business coming in from even Kenya itself, they have to fold. But you know, this is a country. We have how many countries in Africa alone? That there's no other currency printing, as far as I know, in a company in Africa. This is a very good opportunity for Kenya to have leverage on the presence of this company to generate business and get employment and generate income, you know, revenues. But so whatever the situation, I think generally, you know, international businesses are always looking at opportunities, returns on their investments, and one of the key factors which affect the level of returns you get is on the tax. That's why they look at the tax advantages in various jurisdictions. It's not only those companies you mentioned. There are a lot of other big companies, particularly in horticulture and so forth, which have also relocated to countries like Ethiopia. The reason why Ethiopia is attracting a lot of investments is the cost of doing business there is very low. Energy is very cheap, labor is cheap, land is cheap. Those are the three key factors.
No bureaucracy.
There are no bureaucracies. I mean, and taxation levels are very low, and so it's easy. Tanzania is the same. Land is extremely cheap. Energy is still cheap. Tax rates are low. Corporate tax. I'll give you an example. Corporate tax in Uganda, Tanzania is still less than 12%. It's 30% in this country. In countries like Ethiopia, it's also much lower than, is very low. So the government has been working on this issue of the cost of doing business for a long time. But I think we need to, today there's a lot of competition globally for investors, for businesses. Every country is offering opportunities. Investment parks, we have started the EPZs. I don't think they have done as well as they ought to have done. Even the ones that are there now, there are challenges some of us who are manufacturers are facing because the value addition, in export of 30-40% is not being realized. They have become basically packaging for companies. Some companies are just using it for repackaging simply. But I think there is a need to export is a major issue in our country. But the movement of companies like this of holding should be, should send a alarm to the government that they need to sit with businesses and find out what's going on. And how can they retain businesses? How can they allow them to expand? How can they allow them to invest in the country? I think that dialogue is not there. The government has for a long time not listened to businesses. Government likes focusing on regulatory aspects, not on facilitating business. And this is what is critical. Yeah.
Could that also be affecting Facebook? They will be folding as well. We'll have over 200 employees who will be losing their jobs. I think is a critical issue that needs to be on the table.
What I would throw in something, we have our two professors here from the business school. They'll tell us a bit why companies fold up and move and so on. For these companies like Delaru, the world is their space, is their playing field. Kenya is one of the countries out of the 193 countries around the world. They can be relocated anywhere else out of these countries. And then there is also the geopolitics dealing with the former colonial power. There are many things that go on in the background. And Delaru has had some very controversial issues. I liked what Bella has explained around some of the disputes they have had on the taxes. That's very, very accurate, specific information. And that they could have appealed. And as you see the highlights, profit levels dropping or something like that, maybe they have missed out a contract they should have got that would have maintained their profit margins. They might say, why should we then be here? Our loss is that we have lost employment opportunities for whatever that number was, 400. But we still have to print currency. I do not know what those options are going to be, and maybe somebody else will step in to take up that business. And if some of it is done in Kenya, we may get back some of the jobs in terms of numbers, not the individuals perhaps. But it's for us as a country struggling to sort of modernize our economy. Each time a farm closes, it's like you've lost somebody, and we have to look at that. Now, just the quick summary that has been made by Bill Carroll here, which I think is excellent, on why, for example, these other countries are overtaking Kenya, Angola, Ethiopia. They have just mentioned those two. You can see that it's about certain not transient issues, fundamental issues in the medium and long term that companies forecast that, the climate here is going to be good. Maybe for the next 10 years, who knows? And it might again, get round. Angola shouldn't be ahead of us. It's a mineral economy. That side of the economy may make it a bigger economy. But they don't have the fundamentals of good education, extensive education like we have. They don't even have the basic fundamentals around governance and democracy and so on. I mean, these are very repressive regimes, like I'm talking about Angola now. So that can't be an advantage for a long time, the way I see it. But I think it tells us something. If our governance deteriorates or continues to deteriorate, we can't be competitive, for sure. If we put a veil over sectors, companies, our key sectors like in energy that we have talked about, we can't expect to be competitive in the long run. It hurts us if we do. For a while, we had quite a crisis in our higher education. We still have got a big crisis in its financing. Part of the crisis of finance, higher education is global, but we have our own issues here to deal with. If we don't deal with those, then our competitive edge will also wane and so on. So we know what to do, and many times we know what not to do. On the special economic zones and the special incentives that are used, I think it's a tool that has been used in business economics for a long time, but it's also been abused to the extent that companies could move. They may have a 15-year advantage. Towards the end of it, they either relocate, re-engineer something different. So there are limitations. Now the solution to it is not throw it out through the window, but to say, how else do we do it? There are other people who think that ease up, for example, the tax regime across the board, make it easier to export or to do business with the outside world, because that's where you have huge demand that can help you grow your economy without necessarily having these little enclaves and so on. Or maybe sometimes you might. But open up, make it easier. Make it easier for everybody, including the local firms, so that they can also be competitive. You never know. We could get our own Delarue that will get competitive with others. We just have to put the right atmosphere. Now, in that, as I conclude, in that brief thing, there are 3 countries now that Delarue will still be operating in. What did they say? Malta, Sri Lanka, and the UK itself. That's not very much. There might be another issue with Delarue overall. And of course, there's no doubt that there is some reduction in currency use, in paper use. I don't know if it's significant. I don't know. Because now you can go in the local butcher's shop, in the local market, the grocery and the local market, you can pay with M-Pesa.
Yeah.
That is making a big difference, a little bit. So we will not be so dependent on it. And there have been also issues of what do you call that? There has been some tension between our institutions and Delarue.
Okay.
And so I don't know what else is going on behind the scenes.
All right. Zaki, as we prepare our headline thoughts.
That's an interesting discussion we're having here of why companies are leaving Kenya, because that means job being lost. Particularly for us, we are very concerned because we get students in the job market every year. So if they don't get jobs, that's not good for us. But people are not doing business in Kenya for fun. They want money, they want profit. So if they can't make profit in Kenya, I'll go and make profit where I can. And that should be something we should also remember. So I'm thinking of things like tax. Is it accidental that Delarue is leaving when it was told to pay a certain tax? I don't think that's accidental. So tax is a big issue. Delarue is leaving. At the same time, you are saying we are going to have some people watching you as you do your business. And I think the issue of power is a big factor because it's a very big input in industrialization. And all those companies that are relocating, if you follow them, they are probably going to countries where power is cheaper, like Egypt. And of course, regulations are regulations that we have very pro-business. If you ask a typical businessman on the street of Nairobi, what is your biggest problem? They mention things like KRA, they mention roads, they will talk about wastage disposal, they will talk about paying so many taxes and levies. So the business environment is not very good. But I think there's another factor why companies are leaving, which nobody wants to say loudly. The level of optimism we expected when we got a new government this year is not as high expected. I don't want to compare, but if you compare the optimism we had in this country when Kibaki came to power and now, they are very different. It's as if we don't have a new regime. And we always say a new broom sweeps better. So I think we expect the new government to sweep better in the long run. But let's also not forget that the 3 countries that are doing very well have one thing in common. Angola and Ethiopia were Marxist, communism. So the reason why they are attracting a lot of investors is because they have reformed their social, political, and economic system. And it's a clear indicator that if we want investors to stay here, we also must continuously reform our social system, our economic system, our political system, so that people feel at home, they feel welcome, and they want to bring more and invest more. And finally, I feel sad when I hear that companies are leaving this country, because we should be asking, are there any Kenyan companies leaving other countries? Because we should also be talking about the Kenyan companies, as my colleague said, doing business in other parts of the world. So that even if companies live here, our companies are doing business elsewhere, and they keep on expanding. My worry is that in this country, we are too obsessed with local issues, the ward, the counties. We forget about the East African community, the African Free Trade Area, and the whole world. So we must start looking upwards, outwards.
Right, thank you. Very good. Yeah, let's hear from Ituro.
Briefly. Yeah, I want to pick from Milaki that the optimism which was there about the people. We have a very strong government now, you know. One of the chief economists in this world is the Treasury, the CS. So we expect a lot from them. But having said that, it's an experience I had about 2 weeks ago with the new number plates. And ideally, when in Nairobi, you have to go to Upper Hill to pick those numbers. And I looked at the whole thing, and I was like, we like making queues and wasting time. That's something could you say we have a station in Siri, Buruburu, or you zone it in Nairobi.
Said it to me.
And do those things quickly. So if I'm in a place where I have to get a license, it have to go start there for days, and where I look, and we have discussed today, and he almost looked at power. Investor will look for power. He look at the issue of taxation. And one of the key things in terms of taxation, let me know. Don't change posts in every day. The issue of the infrastructure. So if I'm not the ease of doing business, I'll move to the other country. I believe at the end of the day, I'm responsible to the shareholders. And if they're not making it, the next time is I'll be on the door.
Thank you.
So I think it's something as a country we need to step back. Let's see the glass half full, not half empty.
Thank you.
But issue at the end of the day, as we leave this, governance.
We have to wind up. Governance. Below, we are winding up. We've not discussed even the issue on the lifting of the cap on the 1.5 million shillings transaction that you have to. The bank has to, of course, ask you to make a disclosure on it. Briefly, just highlights because my music is up.
Yeah, okay. Except to add that, you know, Belarus can also print security documents. They can print ballot papers. They can do a lot of things. I mean, the opportunity for business should not just be lost like that. But I think central bank is wrong. And I agree with the president on this matter. He said very clearly that this limit of 1 million in an economy like ours, which is cash-based largely, you know, a subsistence economy, cash-based, was misplaced. And we've tried to push the governor, even when I was in Parliament, in Senate, we've tried to discuss this issue for a long time. And I think the fact that Parliament has now said that, you know, it was not properly, that regulation was not passed by National Assembly, and therefore it's legal, and that law does not stand, I think it's a good thing. In my view, we should make it easy for people to transact, and most of our people still do transact out of cash business. So 1 million is nowadays not a lot of money.
Thank you.
When you look at the cost of...
Gentlemen, let's leave it at that. Our time is not really on our side. And I want to thank you so much for the input, for the information, rich stream of information that we've had today. And we hope also different offices that are concerned with some of the dockets that we've been discussing here will take 1 or 2 points and act on them as well. Thank you very much for your valued company. Continue keeping your eyes peeled here on KTN News. Have a good one.